Okay, so today we're going to look at Thomas Aquinas, and I read two of his essays, and I'm going to discuss the ideas that he goes through in these two essays. And I chose these two essays because they are related to topics we have already looked at on this course. Now, Thomas Aquinas came 1,000 years after Aristotle, but he read Aristotle and he liked Aristotle, or he was certainly influenced by Aristotle. He calls him the philosopher in both of these texts, so I suppose that means he considered him the greatest philosopher in some sense or other. And he applies Aristotle's ideas to his own religious understanding of the world. And what I mean is that he was a Dominican monk, and so he certainly had some ideas which you might say which came from the Bible. He was a monk, so of course he believed in a lot of he believed in the Bible and the ideas contained therein. And so let's deal with on the eternity of the world first, but we will deal with being in essence, and you'll see many of the ideas or many of the ways of understanding the world that Aristotle had. Thomas has exactly the same understanding. But firstly, let's look at the eternity of the world, because Thomas is a Catholic, and so he believes that God created the world, and yet he seems to understand that rationally Aristotle's position that the world is eternal is one which cannot be disproven. He seems to understand that that the creation of the world is something that you can take on faith alone. Okay, and so in this essay he makes the point at the beginning of the essay, and I think he understands that most people would claim it's a contradiction to say that something has been made by God and that something has always existed. Yeah, and think about it, guys. Is that a contradiction? Is it a contradiction to say that God created the world and the world is eternal? Because Thomas says no. And I must admit, I was surprised, because I would say, yes, it is a contradiction. It certainly looks like a contradiction to say that God created the world at some point in time, yeah? And therefore, that world cannot have always existed because God created it, okay? But Thomas says no, and he's going to explain why, and I'm just going to do my best to give it the strongest possible form, because I do like to read philosophers and try to understand what's the strongest form of their argument. Of course, that's the best way to be when you hear a new argument. And so Thomas says no. He says, if you do think that there's a contradiction between these two statements, that's because either an agent cause must precede an effect in time. Let's just say a cause must precede, must go before an effect in time. Agent here, he just means he also thinks in terms of four different causes, just like Aristotle, his teacher. Do you remember there was material cause, formal cause, efficient cause? Yeah, and agent cause was one of those four causes. Now, I'm not going to go into those four causes or four types of explanation again, just because we've got a lot to get through today. But just take it as the cause must precede the effect in time. But this is just one type of cause. It's when somebody is the causal agent. Yes, an agent. And so God here, that God must precede the world that he created in time. Yeah, or that non-being must precede the effect in time. Before something comes into existence, it must be non-being before that time. Yeah, first nothing, then something.